Hello, I'm Georgie Frost. Welcome back to Insurance Tomorrow, brought to you by Allianz. Autonomous vehicles could soon be on UK roads as legislation develops and real-world testing accelerates.
I genuinely believe there's a very clever balance to be struck between where you've got lots of data versus kind of human insight and judgment around how these vehicles might actually react.
A lot of people just think about the technology advancing, can it do X, can it do Y? And it is advancing at a pace, but everything's got to come with it. The legislation, the laws, the liability. A policeman's got to know if they see a person having a sleep in the car in front, is it an autonomous vehicle?
Today I'm joined by Alexandra Wyard, Director of Product and Proposition for Personal Lines at Allianz UK, and Dominic Tough, Senior Research Engineer at Thatcham Research, which tests the next generation of driver assistance technology, or ADAS, as it's known. Together we'll explore a future driverless world and why this could represent one of the biggest shifts the insurance industry has faced in decades. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Driverless taxis are already operating in parts of the US and China. I saw them in San Francisco myself when I was there last year. And in fact, the topic of autonomous vehicles and the insurance industry was Insurance Tomorrow's very first episode back in 2018.
I think this is definitely the time where science fiction has become science fact.
Everyone is working on it. Everyone is investing vast amounts in it. But no one knows for sure that it's technically possible. I think Google is orders of magnitude away from the levels of error it needs to achieve.
It depends on the environment, though.
The key thing here is that no one entity or government can answer that question because it's actually a collaboration of all sorts of different inputs, whether it be infrastructural, telecommunications, road infrastructure, motor manufacturers, technology, artificial intelligence, legislative environments. A whole load of stuff has to be developed.
That was Glenn Clark, Head of Transformational Propositions at Allianz UK, Tim Armitage, Project Director at UK Autodrive and Transport Systems Lead at Arup, and Matt Hervey, Director of Intellectual Property at law firm Gowling WLG, speaking in 2018. And we visited the topic again 6 years later.
I think by 2026, we will have some automation in the UK. I think it will be extremely limited, like valet parking, like one car that can do level 3. And then I think by the time we get to 2030, we might have a few more vehicles that can do it. But it's going to be decades until you can get in your car and say, take me to work, and then you can have a kip in the back.
That was Dominic's Thatcham Research colleague, Tom Leggett, speaking with Alex on Insurance Tomorrow in 2024. Alex, listening back to that, what do you think? Do those predictions still hold?
I think the predictions hold. I think the thing that's always been a challenge for us has been the timeline, how quickly this vehicle technology will be adopted across the market. I still believe an awful lot of what we were saying, but it feels like we're constantly saying this is coming, and there's going to be a moment at which it arrives, and that's the thing we've got to be ready for.
So where are we right now?
We're in a very messy middle, I would say. We've got an awful lot of interesting and evolving technology on vehicles. We've got an awful lot that drivers won't even be aware of that is happening. We've got the legislation that is coming into force this year that really solidifies that transfer of liability. But in terms of our customers in the insurance market, the personal lines insurance market, are brokers going to be dealing with queries from fleet managers who are looking at large scale, fully autonomous fleets in 2026? I think that might not be the case.
Dom, is that something that resonates with you?
So I agree with Alex with a sort of messy middle ground. And I see we're going kind of two directions. With personal vehicles, you're kind of getting very high levels of assisted driving. So you're having hands off the wheel, but your eyes still need to be on the road and you're still liable as the driver. And then we're also seeing these sort of fleet insurance and these big companies bringing robo-taxis or autonomous parking zones. So you're kind of seeing these two different avenues we're going down.
Dom, what autonomous innovations are being tested at sites across the country now?
We're seeing a lot of hands-free assisted technology. So we're really trying to work out how the driver interacts with the technology. It's not about replacing the driver. It's about having that balance and that combination between the driver and machine. Because at the moment, they're still liable. but they are doing a lot of heavy lifting for you. Like say the Ford Blue Cruise Mach-E allows you to drive hands-free on the motorway, but you need to keep your eyes on the road and make sure you're looking what's going on around you.
Alex, what do brokers and businesses need to know when it comes to the classification of autonomous vehicle levels?
I think the point at which liability shift happens in terms of whether the driver's liable or the insurer or the vehicle manufacturer is really crucial once this new legislation is in full force. And I think that's really important because you have to have that real clarity for customers. You have to have that real contract certainty in terms of being clear about what you would do at point of claim. So what information you would need from a vehicle or from a customer and how you would potentially handle that claim. I think also there's a real secret sauce here in terms of just understanding vehicles. Increasingly, we're talking about big data sets. So everyone gets really excited about how much data there is available. But I genuinely believe there's a very clever balance to be struck between where you've got lots of data versus kind of human insight and judgment around how these vehicles might actually react. And taking all the great data that Thatcham provide, vehicle manufacturers provide, and third-party suppliers can give us to really build a credible and sensible and logical view about how you might price and underwrite these vehicles.
Dom, what analysis needs to be undertaken at each level before these vehicles can get onto the UK's roads?
It depends on what kind of level they're at. If they're fully autonomous, they need to be able to do 100% of the driving in whatever situation it is they're approved for. A lot of the wording that gets put around in legislation is a careful and competent driver. They need to be as good as a careful and competent driver. What's a careful and good competent driver? So I think on the roads at the moment, we have 1,600 deaths on UK roads. We're not going to accept that. If an AV autonomous vehicle has even one accident, I think there's going to be quite an inquest into it. So it's really putting those definitions on table and who really wants to put a number to it.
With that in mind, what safety technology are you looking at right now?
We're looking more at the assisted side of the technology, the hands-free, the eyes-on road driving. We've done a lot of testing recently. We put our own sensors on the vehicle and we measure them how they work in the real world. So test tracks are great. Computer simulations, they're great. They give you a lot of data. But we're looking at how they work in the real world, how drivers are going to use them. Are there things like phantom braking? Does it work on all kinds of lines? Because as we know, test track lines, they're perfectly painted, but in the real world, they're faded. You've got cyclists, you've got people do all sorts of wacky things on the roads, and we need to see how they work in those environments.
With all this talk about technology, I have to ask the inevitable question, where do and where will humans fit into the loop?
They will always be there in some capacity. At the moment on personal vehicles, they're still key part, they're still liable, they're still the driver, they're still in control. Even if Tesla call their assisted system full self-driving and then they put a little asterisk that says, except you've got to do this, and this, the driver is still responsible in those sort of personal vehicles. So yeah, they'll always be important. There'll be evolutionary steps and manufacturers and legislation are always trying to get more technologically advanced, but there's still that fallback of the driver. We haven't quite got that step of where you can go for a nap or you can go on your phones, etc. And there's going to be a long way off.
Alex, what's your take on that from a risk perspective?
So I think we're some way off no one overseeing a vehicle. I think that the next stage of the evolution is almost inevitably having somebody in a command center overseeing fleets of taxis or commercial vehicles. So there is still a person involved in the movement of a vehicle. I think that the important thing for us to remember from a risk and a liability point of view is actually what are we expecting to happen? How are we expecting vehicles to behave? And actually, how will these different levels of autonomy and assisted driving features actually interact with each other? So I think there's a common view that there will be fewer crashes. And I think once we're fully autonomous, that is almost certainly true. But we're potentially going to go through quite a messy period where that's not necessarily the case.
Let's just focus on this year, because there's a lot going on, it feels like, this year. You mentioned regulation, Alex. What is happening there?
The autonomous vehicle regulation, so the legal framework that allows for the transfer of liability away from drivers, is coming into force in late 2026. And that really unlocks the potential for the classification of vehicles to change, to be allowed to effectively drive themselves. The legal framework is incredibly important. It can sound like a tick box, but it's really important because not creating a world where anybody can just call their vehicle autonomous. There was a slight allusion earlier to some of the challenges as an industry we've seen, and I would echo that drivers, as they currently are, need to be really clear about what a car can and can't do. And without the right framework around that, it can be really dangerous. So as soon as that legislation all lands and is in place, and we've got the right classification of vehicles and the right terminology around it, we've got that opportunity to then accelerate forward.
Dom, there was a big head nod from you there. What was that about?
It's a really key point, because a lot of people just think about the technology advancing, can it do X? Can it do Y? And it is advancing at a pace, but everything's got to come with it. The legislation, the laws, the liability. A policeman's got to know if they see a person having a sleep in the car in front, is it an autonomous vehicle? I don't need to pull him over. That's fine. So there's so much around it. It's not just as simple as the car is a very capable car.
As vehicles move from assisted driving, Alex, to more developed forms of autonomous vehicle, as we've discussed earlier in more detail, how does that change the way that liability is being understood?
First and foremost, insurers will always be customer first. We as an industry are here to provide that protection for our customers. So I think from a claims point of view, the first port of call is us going to be getting our customers back up and running. And that has to be the key point. But I think it's what happens after that is really important. So there is going to be, with some of these autonomous driving vehicles, the opportunity for an understanding of whether it was the vehicle at fault in the event of an accident, and therefore some transfer of liability. What that means in terms of data provision, so we're going to need very clear, unbiased access to data for both insurers and law enforcement. That's very, very important. And obviously, absolute clarity about what products offer. And I think that, from an underwriting point of view, is incredibly interesting, because that's the bit that says, what do insurance products of the future look like? So will we have vehicle manufacturers needing new product liability offerings? Will we have customers taking out layered coverages? They'll have coverage for existing needs, less the liability part, and then the vehicle manufacturer or insurers will provide a secondary element.
When we talk about the messy middle, the timeline is, should we say, undecided. We're not quite sure. But so what could people be doing now to make sure that you take advantage of these sort of opportunities, I suppose?
I think the first thing is see it as an opportunity. See it as a way to be building and shaping the future rather than something that's done to you. If electric vehicles taught us anything, it was early adopters have come out well. So start thinking about the coverage that your products offer. Start thinking about how that might sit around different technologies, the way people might use these vehicles. There's such an opportunity for commercial insurers. And I genuinely think it's super exciting if you put some thought into it. I would also say we as the insurance industry have a huge amount of data around this technology that not everyone will be using. All of the technology that is used to make a vehicle autonomous is already fitted to vehicles because it's all being used in part for assisted driving. So take the time to understand how those individual features work. Thatcham come and help you with that. And also make sure that you understand which vehicles are going to be good. Not all of these technologies are born equal, and some vehicle manufacturers are really good at it. So know your appetite, know your products, and start to really lean into the opportunity here.
What more would you like to see from government or manufacturers to help the industry better prepare for what's coming down the road, but also to take advantages, like you take advantage of the opportunities, like you said?
I think Alex alluded to it before. It's about the access to the data. There's tons of data on vehicles. It's there. It's getting access to it. Having something somewhere, a central hub that is safe and secure for the vehicle manufacturers, so they can be confident, because the insurers need that data in an autonomous world. They need to know who was at fault. Was it the car? Was it the driver? Was it something else? Was it the infrastructure? And the only way you're going to unlock that is with data access. So that is probably the key point that we need from government and legislation.
How central is data to the work you do?
Extremely. We're a very data-centric company now, but we still enjoy the real-world testing, and we have a nice balance of using the two. So we like to access the data on finding hotspots where accidents may be happening commonly, roundabouts, junctions, etc. So we can then go out into our test track, test these sorts of systems. And Alex says we can test multiple systems and see how they differentiate between one another. Just because all cars have AEB doesn't mean they all work in the same situation. So that's the kind of research that we do, using that data to inform us where we need to go, where we need to put our input, where we need to put our development into. And yeah, it really helps us define how we're going to go about our business.
Alex, how important will this data be in helping brokers and insurers actually price and understand this new type of risk?
Data is king. Data is king in everything we do in our lives now, but particularly in the insurance industry. The UK is such a competitive market that if you don't understand and really understand the risks you're writing and the environment they're operating in, then you will always struggle. I think with autonomous vehicles, the thing that's really crucial is understanding the individual performance features of the technology that's fitted to each vehicle, and then how that's going to work in a fleet or for an individual. So data is really, really important, and access to data at point of claim is absolutely crucial, and the legislation around that is something that we will continue to champion for.
We mentioned at the start that actually autonomous vehicles are on the roads in certain parts of the US, also in China as well. What is the technology like over there? Is it safe?
It's different. The reason the US and China are maybe more ahead of the game in that sense is the regulation is a bit Wild West over there, i.e. there's very little of it. In Europe, we're very regulation heavy, which can be quite a good thing. Whereas in places like America and China, they have a lot more freedom to implement different systems with limited regulation boundaries. But we're sort of seeing that as an opportunity, because whilst they're having the vehicles out there, they're gathering lots of data, they're gathering lots of insight. And whilst the roads in America and China are very different to the roads in UK, we can gather some early insights into how they're working in those sorts of road types, and then try and apply that in the UK so we can get ahead of the game. It's not a new system that's coming to the UK market. You know, it's already been in the US for a while, maybe. And we can use that data. So we work a lot with MIT, the university over there, to gather some insights into how those systems work in the US.
So we're learning from, I suppose, the technological development. What about things like claims?
I think Allianz has a huge advantage in that we are a large global insurer, and therefore we get insight. Obviously, our huge testing environment in Germany does similar work to what Thatcham do, actually, and for the rest of Europe. And so we do get insights into claims. I think one of the biggest things that I would say is quite interesting for now on the claims experience is actually that the interaction between these sorts of vehicles and non-autonomous vehicles on the road is going to cause a bit of a challenge. So more rear-end damage to these vehicles, where perhaps they are stopping more quickly than other road users expect. And therefore, the sort of slightly changing nature of the way claims experience will play through a portfolio is quite important. Also, the way they interact with non-vehicle road traffic. Our cities are complex. When you think about micromobility, e-scooters, e-bikes, perhaps pedestrians behaving unexpectedly, all of that comes together to make it a real challenge for these vehicles to navigate the landscape. And so I think it's allowing for not just the data we take from abroad and test cases, but also what we already know instinctively about our roads to build a full picture.
I want to focus now on brokers working with logistics and delivery clients. What conversations do you think need to be happening right now?
So I think there's a real two-way conversation to happen here. So how quickly are they thinking about adopting this sort of technology? What does their fleet look like currently? How likely are their drivers or fleet operators to turn off technology or to use it or not use it? Because the whole point is that whilst technology is optional, different vehicle users, shall we call them, will interact with it differently. I think we also need to make sure that as professionals in the industry, we are prepared to stand by our credentials and understanding what the fleet operators will need in any given environment. So explaining why they need certain terms, what's going to cost more, having that really good quality two-way conversation rather than it just being about, we'll renew you on the same terms, same price, and we'll just hope, because actually that doesn't do anybody a good service. And I think our customers, be they large commercial or an individual, will be really reassured by the fact that we've put some thought into what their future needs might be.
Dom, what will fleet safety look like in a more automated world?
I think you're going to find a very mixed fleet. You might have some vehicles that have very high levels of either assisted driving or autonomy, and then you might have half your fleet that's just bog standard vans, ICE vehicles, EVs. You're going to have a very broad mix of different vehicles. You need to be able to be flexible because that fleet could change from year to year, month to month. So you really need the ability to change and adapt to your model.
One of the things that I would add to on that point, which is really true, is that an awful lot of brokers won't know the makeup of a fleet. They will know they're insuring 100 vehicles or 1,000 vehicles. So it's a mixed fleet, but you might not even know what's in that fleet. And so the important thing from a broker point of view is being ready for anything entering that fleet. So your terms need to be sort of ready for both types of vehicles. Your coverage needs to be ready for all types of vehicle. And perhaps when you're writing that fleet at the outset, having that upfront conversation about what's the flight path, what's the plan in terms of how that fleet might evolve.
Alex, as we move through this messy middle, which the more I've heard from this conversation, the more I think that sounds very appropriate title for it. What does the future insurance landscape start to look like?
Innovative and exciting. I think there will be organisations who really embrace the opportunity to partner with vehicle manufacturers and data providers and brokers who are at the forefront of building new products that really suit this changing landscape. And there will be some who don't change, and that's also fine, but it means that they're going to be facing into a real headwind. So the reality is that the average age of a vehicle on the roads in the UK is 10. So it's going to be some time before the complete need for the products we currently have disappears. But I think there is a really exciting opportunity here to embrace what the future might be, because it would be horrible if, as an industry, we were the reason this technology couldn't be adopted.
Dominic, in terms of new infrastructure and safety systems, what do you expect to emerge?
I expect, as I mentioned at the beginning, that we're going to go into this very advanced level assisted driving system. I kind of call it level 2.9. Some people call it 2++. You're going to add 17 pluses by the end of it. But it's kind of a way of the manufacturing allowing very advanced assistance technology. So you're going to have hands off the wheel, not only on motorways, but potentially on other road types. But they still can fall back on that liability of the driver. They still need to be watching. They still need to be looking in case there's a situation that the vehicle can't handle. And like we sort of said, it's that messy middle ground where the driver needs to be clear on what their responsibility is. They are still the driver. They are still in control of this vehicle, even if it's doing a lot for you. And I've been over to the States. Some of my colleagues have been to the States who drive these kind of vehicles, and they are very capable. And it's very impressive. But there are times where they'll fail. There are times where they won't be able to deal with the situation because they're not autonomous. They're very close to it, but there's that very fine line, and we haven't switched over past it yet.
So, Alex, what should brokers be doing now then to prepare themselves for this shift? What are the next, I suppose, immediate steps you can take?
Establishing your own risk appetite. So knowing your current exposure. So what sort of technology are you currently writing? If you have the opportunity to understand how good your risk models are, how good your pricing is on different types of technology, really lean into that granular data around different vehicles. Know your policy wordings, know what you're covering, and know how you might change it in the future. And then just be really open to exploring the trends as they evolve. So not being afraid to read around the topic, understand when different technology is coming to market, and then seeing how that plays through your claims data. Because actually, the more you look at it, the more interesting it is, the more complex it is, but actually the more of an opportunity there is.
Alex, Dom, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experience. Absolutely fascinating.
Wonderful to be here.
We're taking a break for the summer, but we'll be back with a fascinating new episode examining how geopolitical turmoil and economic uncertainty are shaping the insurance industry. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to hear more, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode when it's released. You can also watch on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. A reminder that we'd love to hear from you. If there are topics you're discussing with colleagues and clients or questions you'd like us to put to our experts, just get in touch via the link in the show notes. Insurance Tomorrow is brought to you by Allianz. I'm Georgie Frost. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.